And welcome to Rewind Reviews. We're back, Chris. It doesn't feel like that long because we powered through Korra very quickly. So it feels like we only finished the series of Rewind Reviews like a couple of weeks ago. And then I thought about it. I was like, no, it was just a few weeks ago. We recorded Korra in like 4 weeks. So we're back for Rewind Reviews.
Yeah, man. We're back, baby.
So as I punished us at the end of the last series, I chose the, not to give the game away, but I chose the Rugrats movie, Chris. Out of morbid curiosity.
It's a choice that come up a few times. Like, we discussed it like a few weeks prior, and both discussed it in a our memory is this was quite a good, fun movie.
Yep.
So the experiment was, is it going to hold up?
Yep.
Like a true, is it going to hold up?
Because equally, neither of us had seen it recently. It was not. It's not a movie we'd gone back to. And I remember. I think I said. I may have just thought it, but I'm pretty sure I said on a podcast. The funny thing about this is, all the other, or not all, but a lot of the other movies we do on this podcast, we've gone back to in our adulthood because we liked them and already know they hold up, or already know they don't. Right? I can't speak for you. I have probably not seen this film since I was a child, and that arguably says a lot because Child Dan fucking loved this movie.
So what did you? Was it the classics? Did you have it on VHS? What was your history with this film? Apologies, I'm going to try and keep it in. I got a little bit of a cold. Hopefully you won't hear me coughing. Just caveat. Carry on with your history, Dan.
I know I've just stopped coughing from having COVID, so I'm now going to have to do a lot of. I was like, oh, finally I can edit a podcast without having to go through every minute of it to check for coughs. But Chris went and got ill.
I should be able to try and avoid it. Avoid being too near the mic. I will do my best.
It's okay. It's fine. I was making a little joke, doing a little funny.
Oh yeah, no, I know. Don't worry.
I'll gladly go through the podcast, Chris, and remove your coughs. It'll be good actually because I had to do that recently with our Korra podcasts, and then when people started asking me how my hot dog stand was doing, I knew what the fuck they were talking about, and I feel like if I hadn't gone back through them that recently to check for coughs, I wouldn't have known what that was.
When the fuck did we talk about you having a hot dog stand?
Exactly. See, Chris is in the other position where he is not edited those episodes since we did it. The very first episode, Chris, I opened by making a joke about how so much time had passed between Korra that our lives had changed a lot. You now had 3 children from 3 different wives. And I owned a successful hot dog stand and was a hot dog mogul, to which you replied, let's be honest, the uncomfortable truth about that is you could make more money if you had a hot dog stand, and I said there's no could about it.
Yeah, that's very good.
But I'd forgotten that happened. But then I had to go through them. I'd forgotten that happened. Had to go through the podcasts with a fine tooth comb, so to speak, and was reminded of the various things we'd said. And that meant that when people started congratulating me on my hot dog stand, I knew what the fuck they meant, because otherwise I would have had the reaction you just had.
Just quickly then, because there's presumably a lot of paperwork and a lot of like food hygiene stuff, and you've got to find a spot on a market or a street to have your stand.
Yes.
Whereas presumably, actually, 3 children by 3 different women would logically only take 9 months. Do you think it would be possible for someone to get and own and start a hot dog stand business quicker? I think that would take longer than having 3 children by 3 different women.
Well, it depends, Chris, because if you're smart about how you approach it, you might be able to purchase an existing hot dog stand.
Ooh, great shout. Didn't think of that.
That already has all of its like permits and permissions. And then, I describe myself as a hot dog mogul in that podcast. So
well, you've got hot dog stands by 3. You've got 3 hot dog stands from 3 different hot dog vendors. That's what you've got there. Coincidentally, all the women that I knocked up.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, weird, really weird. I like that we're starting this podcast with an impenetrable reference to a podcast someone might not have listened to. If you want to know more about what we're talking about, that's how we started discussing Legend of Korra. It's like the first thing that we talk about in the first episode of Legend of Korra, so I think that's episode 60 of Analyzing Avatar. Anyway, what's
your history with the Rugrats movie?
Yes, so when I was a kid, I was a huge fan of the Rugrats TV show. I always thought it was so clever. the way they would have these really large scale adventures from their home. You know, this idea that they would like, you know, go to space, or, you know, be in like an Indiana Jones parody, or like, you know, be sailing on the high seas, and it was all just the kids' imaginations. The whole episode was actually in the real world, them like in their dad's garage, like standing on top of his car, and the car was the boat, right? And like, I just used to really, really love the creativity of that. And obviously, you know, the kids were always quite funny. The way they would say things, or like, you know, the way they would approach stuff. They would always have this weird sort of skewed, like, you know, putting together bits of things they'd heard from adults to try and make sense of the world, and like getting that sense that the adults in the series are like having these influences on it. And I always really love as well that the adult stories that went around them were also surprisingly like interesting. Like, I remember, I read a thing recently, and I'll have to go back to the series to see if this is true. But basically, a lot of people say, you know, you watch the show as a kid and you relate to the kids so much, but you watch the show as an adult and like it hits home so hard, the parents and their struggles, because they're all just 30-something parents with babies trying to figure out their lives, and it's just apparently that's extremely relatable. When you watch it, you know, with that context. But anyway, I was a huge fan of the show. I thought the show was fantastic, and I think I was one of the kids that got the show brought back, because there was a period of time when the show wasn't really in production anymore after its first couple of seasons. But Nickelodeon didn't have a lot of content at that point, so they just reran it into the ground, and that's when it gained a huge amount of popularity. This is sort of like, I want to say like 94, 95, and I think that's when we moved to Ireland, and I had access to Nickelodeon, or a version of it, through my grandparents. They had Sky. We couldn't afford Sky, but my grandparents had Sky, so I every time I went around there, I'd watch whatever kids' channels they had, because that was like my only access to them. And like Rugrats, again, was during that era, was just like on repeat, especially around like 95. So the show gets revitalized because of that interest that grew from that. And then they start planning this movie. And I remember them promoting the movie on the channel. And then I remember not shutting up about it. I just this distinct memory of exasperation from my parents. To the point where I'm pretty sure they took me to see it opening weekend to shut me up. And back then, we didn't have...
Literally opening weekend.
Yeah, literally opening weekend. And I remember this because then it was still showing for weeks after, and then I was talking about seeing it a second time. Because basically, you know, in Ireland where I lived, there was a small theatre, a very small one with like 50 seats, tiny screen, on the main high street in Roscommon, that would do like one showing a day, or occasionally they'd stretch to two. And to really go to like a big multiplex that was showing multiple things and catch all the movies, you'd really have to go to Galway or Athlone, where there was a big shopping centre that had a big cinema at the back of it. And I remember at Burger King, because we used to always go to the cinema and then have Burger King. And because I remember going to see Men in Black there, and the Burger King had Men in Black based toys, and they had the little pen, you know, the pen that they use in the movie to erase people's memories. Yeah. That was one of the options for the toy, and I wanted that so badly. And then
you erased your parents' memory of seeing the film and went back and watched it a second time.
Exactly. No, they didn't. But the week we went, they didn't have the pen. They had the little toy car, and I was so upset.
I really thought you were going to go, but the pens didn't work, Chris. They were just toys. And I was going to be like, yeah, no, I know, Dad.
Yeah, I figured you'd do that. Anyway, so we go see the Rugrats movie. We come back, and I basically I'm hyper. I'm so excited. I love the movie so much. Child Dan just had the best time. Like, best movie I've ever seen, best movie experience. Like, I cannot explain the joy the movie brought to me as a child. I don't understand it, especially not now, having rewatched it. But Child Dan fucking loved that movie. And I think no matter what criticisms I may levy at the movie today, it's never going to undercut how much joy the film brought me as a child. Because the movie's aimed at children, right? So it worked. Like, no matter what adult Dan perceives as flaws in the film. It functioned very well. And yeah, so that then obviously it was when it came to VHS, it was another one of those like rented at a bunch sort of movies. But I think of all the movies I've described as, wearing the tape into the ground, I think this is the one I maybe dropped the earliest from that sort of rotation, as it were. Movies like Gremlins and Aladdin, RoboCop, these movies I watched well into my teens and onwards, Rugrats, I'm not sure when I kind of stopped going back to the movie, but early, quite early. And I don't know if that's telling of the movie's aim. Is this one of those movies that's just aimed at children, specifically, not trying to be for both? I'm not sure. We'll talk about that, I guess. But yeah, I had a really good time with this movie as a kid, and I just distinctly remember it being an absolute sort of masterpiece of cinema. I don't think I will have said it that way, but that's definitely how I felt about it. So yeah, that was my sort of history with it until coming back to it now. How about you, Chris? What did you have any specific memories of seeing it? Did you see it in the cinema, or is this something you saw later on?
My cousin had a copy on VHS.
Right.
It's a much shorter story than yours. No, I'm joking. So yeah, but no, that was the case. So I think Rugrats for me, bizarrely, and I think this might have been the reason you dropped it. I think the genius thing about Rugrats is how much it can appeal to kids and how it managed to, because Rugrats aired for 10 years or something, and obviously then recently came back as well. It kept renewing that audience. But I think the flip side of that is you get to a certain age where you inherently go, oh, children's cartoons are for children. You've got The Simpsons, which feels a bit more dangerous. Then you get into an age of South Park, and then you get into kind of live action. And I think for me, the TV show, I always liked watching it. I was never obsessed with the TV show, because I think my main memory of the TV show was it would almost be the thing on Live and Kicking that you had to get out of the way to watch Keenan and Kel. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I was very much like, when's the Keenan and Kel coming? And that was sort of a big exposure to Rugrats through Saturday morning TV, maybe more than Sky. Because again, I think by that point I was quite a young age when I was already all about the sitcoms. Mm-hmm. So I remember enjoying Rugrats though, and I remember really enjoying this. My cousin had a copy on VHS. He was in my memory a bit more all about them Rugrats. And I remember being like, "Oh, can I borrow this?" You do that thing where you you go around anyone's house at that age and you're trading VHSs. And I remember just being like, "Oh, can I borrow this?" And they said, "Yeah." And I remember watching it and being like, "Oh, that was a blast. That was really good." But I remember I can't tell you what sort of, I guess, around it coming out on VHS, whatever that was. But I already felt, whether it was true or whether it was just an inflated sense of I don't know, adulthood. I remember watching it feeling too old to watch it, but still then really enjoying it and really getting a kick out of it. So yeah, and being surprised at how good it was. So yeah, that's sort of my memory of it.
Mm. So how did you feel sitting down, a little ill? I can't imagine helped to watch it this time. What are the overriding thoughts having just watched the movie again?
I watched it last night, and yeah, it was a bit fever dreamish.
I bet.
You know what? I think I can absolutely see why I enjoyed it. And you know what? I didn't disenjoy it this time. There's some genuinely really, really funny lines in there. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stuff that's aimed at adults. What is it? If the baby's born under Venus, look for her, and then she gets cut off.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? That's an adult joke. There's some fairly dark humor. There's a bit where they think a kid's been he loved climbing trees.
Yeah,
and now he's been crushed by one.
Yeah, no. I think the line is something like, he loved climbing trees and now a tree has climbed him.
Yeah, there's some really
I think he's
funny
been crushed
bits.
by a tree is the setup for that joke. It's very funny,
and it's And it's quite layered as well. It's talking about the impact a new child has on friendships, brotherhoods, the weight of responsibility. They draw parallels between Tommy and Dill and Stu and his brother, which is a very clever thing that they didn't need to do. The challenge with this movie, and the problem is the challenge with this movie for me is there's two motifs, there's two things they do that I find so incredibly irritating. One is randomly bursting into, I don't actually mind that. It's sort of that be a musical or don't thing. Like
fucking the songs.
The songs, the remixed versions of well-known songs, just for like 30 seconds at a time, occasionally, is just every time that starts, I genuinely just wanted to skip ahead. I didn't,
me too.
but I genuinely just wanted to skip ahead.
They're awful.
And
the
joke,
awful.
the joke of saying the adult phrase wrong, thank Bob. And we're off to see the lizard and all of that stuff, which I remember being really endearing in the TV show, is just overdone a bit in the movie in certain sections.
But Chris, she's got a butt hound because she wants those fugitives back in custody.
Exactly, and that's the thing. They're not even. There's like whole lines where there's like 4 of them within one line, like, and it's just so those.
But Chris, you could say you just don't get the facts of lice.
Jesus. So those two things, take the baby back to the hospital.
Yeah.
Like that's throughout the whole thing.
Well,
and it's
Chris,
really weird.
That quote gave me goosebumps.
Jeez. So, but those two things make the movie. They don't even make the movie bad. They just make the movie meh. They just made me finish the movie and go, well, that was a thing. That was something I did for 80 minutes. And I think it's a bit of a shame because it's kind of like the good stuff isn't so incredible that it outweighs that. And the bad stuff actually isn't so awful that it brings the whole thing, it makes the movie shit. It just levels out as like, all right, because it's just, those two things in particular are just irritating. And it's a shame because there's some really clever stuff here. How they conceivably get the babies into the middle of the forest there's just a lot of fun. Did you, going into this movie, Dan, were you going, oh, there's probably going to be a scene where some monkeys chase the babies in a dinosaur pram into a cave? Like, of course not. There's some really fun shit in here. There's some genuinely fun stuff, and the way they tie it back to character and brotherhood and its themes, whilst maybe arguably it's trying to do a lot. Like when they first introduced the Chucky thing, I'm like, oh god, we've got a Chucky friendship jealousy angle on this as well. But they tie it together. It works quite nicely. They have to flip flop a bit. Tommy flip flops with Dill a bit too much in the movie, in my opinion. Pick a lane instead of being like you. Like there's a point where he's literally gonna cover him in bananas so the monkeys eat him, and then he just like stops. Like,
oh
so,
man, we need to talk about that scene. That scene is dark, but we'll come back to that. But yeah,
but so it's just, I think in terms of overall feeling, is it just comes out as it's a fun kids movie. You know what I mean? I don't hate it, and I'm not sat here going everyone needs to watch this. It's more nuanced than you realised. It is more nuanced than you realise, a lot more nuanced than you realise. But that is undercut by some really irritating songs and dialogue. So
yeah. I
sort of came out of it very much like, that's a movie that I've just watched, and now I need to go to sleep.
Yeah, like you finish the movie, you just think, right, back to Norman. Okay, so yeah, I think sorry, did I cause you to cough there with the shit? Oh no, I think we've lost him.
Sorry,
he's dying. Everyone, you have to say sorry. You finish coughing, mate. That's fine.
Very physical reaction to that joke. Carry on.
Yeah, so for me, the issues are threefold, and I think you've hit on two of them. I think the songs are awful, absolutely awful, out of place, awkward. They never work. They're never good songs. There's some interesting visuals that go along with them, but they're not worth it. They interrupt the flow of the movie. The movie kind of stops for each song to happen. They never are moving the plot forward, so that is, I think, why you get that urge to reach for a skip song button. I think, if I'm being honest, I think that's what that I think that's it feels like the songs were an afterthought, and therefore none of them are actually baked into the story properly. You know,
there is one that I liked. Can I say?
Is it Angelica's one? Because that's my favourite one.
No, it's the one where it's the one where they first bring Dill home and Tommy's singing about how he wants his mum and dad back. I quite like. I thought that was quite emotional.
Yes.
Actually.
Yeah. That's very sad. That's plot based as well. Like I do enjoy the Angelica one as well, just because I think that's a funny idea to do one way or another. I'm going to get you, but she's after Cynthia. I think that's kind of funny. But other than those two, they're all awful. So those two problems are for real. Like Chris is not wrong. The constant using of the same joke, which is the kids saying the saying wrong, how prevalent that is throughout the movie. It's like every other line. It's really obnoxious. It gets quite old. And the songs are bad for the reasons we've mentioned. The other issue for me is their decision to make the movie have more scale than the show hurts the charm of the thing. Because Rugrats' charm, for me, was always how small scale the things were because they were babies. They're not getting out of their playpens or their homes. You know, they're very much in this one location, being babies, and having to invent with their minds the adventure. That was a lot of the show. Not all of the show, I accept, but many, many episodes of the show were that premise. And then the intercutting between the imagination and the real world. The movie starts with that as almost like a nod to what the show was, but then the adventure is very much a real adventure, and the scale of it is silly. And not in a believable good way. The verisimilitude of this show of this movie is broken. It's hard to believe these kids would be lost out in the woods and not be dead by nightfall, even in a weird, light, fun world like the Rugrats, because the show was always very, very realistic and grounded in its real world stuff, and silly in its dream or imagination sequences. The choice to make it silly in the real world and to make the real world as big as some of their imaginations had been in the episodes sort of weirdly hurts the charm of it. And so there are glimpses of that here, but it's kind of lost in these insane attempts to make the movie have the scale of a movie. Like, they had lots of self-doubt around whether they could make, a cartoon that was 11 minutes an episode have the scale of a movie. So they overcompensated. Oh, the babies will be lost in the woods for real, and there'll be a wolf chasing them and monkeys, and there'll be the dad's gonna fly over in a giant pterodactyl and crash into this ranger hut, and it's gonna be all epic. It's not Rugrats, and it's not even the tone. It's just wrong. It doesn't work.
Do you think it would have been to and this is a classic. Not countering because I feel this, but countering for the sake of discussion.
Sure.
Do you think there's a possibility that sustaining that this is what the terror is in their heads, but this is what the terror actually is thing either isn't sustainable for 70 minutes, isn't big enough for a movie screen because it's not real? What do you know what I mean? In a 12-minute short, because Rugrats episodes were divided into two, if memory serves. So
the episodes were made as single episodes of 11 or 12 minutes, and then they were put together for a TV broadcast as an episode that was 20, but it was always two individual segments.
So taking that thing that works really well in an 11-minute episode and expanding it over 70 minutes, is there a possibility that someone like me, but and I have struggled before with jeopardy of something that's not real, even though I suppose in this case it's different because there's real jeopardy to them. What I'm saying is, do you think they discussed it, and do you think there was an active choice of we can't sustain that for 70 minutes?
Yeah, I think there was an active choice.
80, in fact.
I think they absolutely had that exact conversation and landed on the side of we don't want to risk that. We want to make sure that we have enough scale and jeopardy to fuel a movie. I think that's exactly what happened. I'm saying I disagree with that choice. I think the thing is, you absolutely are right in that the jeopardy specifically could be hurt maybe by having it more in their imaginations, whatever the adventure they go on is. But the character stuff could all still be there, and that's what really fuels the story, right? It's the brotherhood stuff. It's the Tommy wanting to protect a brother who's not treating him very well, and wanting to protect that brother in spite of that, because he has, a sense of responsibility instilled in him. Whether he understands that concept thoroughly or not. And when that's contrasted with Stu and Drew's brotherhood, it's actually that's a really clever idea. And the movie gets lost and unable to focus on that because it's such a wild, insane journey in terms of they're physically lost out in the woods. They do cover it a little bit by having the kids have a misunderstanding about their situation, though, because obviously the kids are looking for the lizard instead of the wizard who can wish them out of there. And the payoff to that is genius. Absolutely genius. I thought that as a kid. I think that now. It's so clever. But yeah, I just think the attempts to scale it up do more harm than good, but I absolutely understand how they got there, because I think they got there for exactly the reasons you just said. But I do think it's possible to have achieved a more grounded, true-to-the-show version of this movie. I just think they weren't willing to risk it, which is understandable. This is the first Nickelodeon movie, I believe. The first Nickelodeon animated movie, I should say. So understood. Like I get it. I know why we weren't taking risks, and it paid off. It made a lot of money. It was a successful movie. So and again, and as everything should be caveated with on this podcast, this particular episode of this particular podcast, Child Dan fucking loved this movie. Was he wrong to love this movie? No. He had a great time.
I think it's a great. I felt that even watching it last night. I really felt like this is a great kids movie.
Mm-hmm.
And even not having the time to link it back to the adult brothers relationship as much as I'd have liked it to, because I agree with you on that point. You gotta even then go mid-90s. Do you know what I mean? This isn't a world of Steven Universe. This isn't a world of Owl House. This isn't a world of animated properties going in hard on message and going in hard on the fact that there's a thematic link. There's a nuance there between Dylan, Tommy, and Stu, and I can't remember the other brother's name. Stu and Drew. The fact that the movie even attempted to do that and show that, and actually, the movie's it's targeted towards kids that might be going through a certain amount of brother resentment or jealousy or difficulties. That
probably works for any sibling level, not just brother, but whether it's a sister or between two sisters, or whatever that is, any sort of sibling rivalries that might exist. I think that probably a lot of kids probably related very heavily to the themes of this movie.
Yeah. So and you got to give it credit for that, and it is.
Yeah.
It is and as a kid, you're probably liking the songs, and you're probably either not noticing or finding the verbal things funny. It really, regardless of me coming away from it being a bit all right, fine. That was what it was. This is a brilliant movie for kids. I think it holds up as a brilliant movie for kids as well.
Yeah. I think that's probably still true. It's interesting because how do you scale that? Because, I always kind of had the feeling a movie should work on, a kid's movie should work for adults too, to some degree. But, I guess there has just got to be media that's literally just for kids. That can't not be a thing, I suppose. And maybe my insistence that things work on both levels is kind of I guess that comes from, this idea that, a kid's movie that's just for kids is dumb tripe with no like thematic links or anything like of interest to pull the adults in. But actually, I think there's probably a middle ground too, right? Where like a movie can be tonally in terms of its humor and its approach purely for kids, but could also not treat kids like they're fucking idiots. Because that's, I think, that's where the confusion is there, right? I'm confusing two different problems, I think.
But also, I'm not entirely sure this movie doesn't work for specifically for parents, because it doesn't particularly work for us, because we're sat here going, they could have done more to showcase the link between Stu and Drew and Tommy and Dill. No, a parent's probably not thinking that. A parent's probably relieved that there's a bit of message in there, and actually some of the jokes, some of the humour absolutely works as jokes, like, on us. I laughed out loud multiple times in this.
Yeah, I did too.
And there are some jokes, literally, there's a dick joke. Like, there's literally, it's cut off, but, like, there's literally a dick joke in this movie.
Yeah.
I reckon if you're a parent and you've been watching Peppa Pig and other inane bollocks, sitting down to watch this isn't the worst time you're going to have watching.
Whoa. There are many shows.
I don't know whether
there are many shows you could have picked there, Chris, but Peppa Pig, back off. Just saying.
Okay, well, I've never seen Peppa Pig, so okay,
Peppa
fair
Pig
enough.
is fucking hilarious.
I take that back, but you know what I mean. Like, I don't think
I'm going to send you a clip later from one of the funniest things that I've ever seen, and it's a Peppa Pig moment. I'll show you.
Okay. Peppa Pig was the wrong thing to name.
Yeah.
But you know, in terms of this film is not for two mid-30-year-old men that don't have children. So in terms of truly judging how this film plays for adults, it's actually how it plays for the parents that are also watching it. And I just can't help but feel it probably doesn't play as badly as some other shit they've had to watch.
So interesting, isn't it? Because I was thinking about that. Because as I was watching this last night, I was kind of imagining my parents would have been around my age now when taking me to see it. In fact, actually, they'd have been a few years younger than I am now when they took me to see this film. And I was thinking about that quite a lot.
How old were your parents when they had you?
Like 19.
Oh no, I suppose my parents were early 20s, so yeah, that would make sense still.
Yeah, I think my mum was like 19, like maybe 20 at most.
Jesus.
Too young. So
Fucking hell. Anyway, yeah, carry on.
So my parents were younger than I am now when they dragged me to see this movie by my brief calculations. So I was thinking a lot about that. I was thinking a lot about how they will have reacted to this movie. And part of me thinks, did they just sleep through a lot of the movies I dragged them through? Because, what are they getting out of this? I mean, admittedly, it's a brisk hour and 15, hour and 20, somewhere in that range. That's obviously that's good. that's in and out, as a good kids film should be, I think. But yeah, I couldn't help but wonder if they would have been exhausted by it, bored by it, frustrated by it. Because I tell you what, I watched this with Nadia last night, and she lost interest very quickly. Very quickly. She found the whole thing too slow and plodding, and was like looking at her phone and then doing knitting, and then like getting up and like doing other stuff. And like I was like, do you want me to pause it while you leave the room? She's like, no. Like, nodded, like very quickly disengaged from the film. And we did say what we'll do, we'll have a look at the show and see if the show is better at keeping us engaged than the movie was. Because even I did feel there were certain points in the movie, again, around the songs, I think, I was like, it's quite a tiring experience. I could see somebody falling asleep to this. But of course, when I was a kid and I saw these movies, I didn't know that my parents, I'm sure my parents slept through many movies I dragged them to. But I do wonder about that. Like, were they asleep during this? And I was just so enraptured by the film that I didn't notice,
Yeah, and I think to some degree, because there is definitely bits, there's a lot of the forests, like core forest stuff in the middle gets a little bit repetitive. Like, they're annoyed with Dill, they're not annoyed with Dill. The monkeys are chasing after them, the monkeys are not chasing after them. There's a wolf hovering. Like, it's very, it's a little repetitive. But you know what? To some degree, fundamentally, it's a movie about characters needing to get from A to B. And I have noticed recently, after watching 1917 at home, and that film's incredible, don't get me wrong, But there are moments, I was watching that film back when it's not in the cinema and there's not the spectacle and all of that sort of stuff. I was watching that movie going back. Oh, there are points in this movie where they literally go, like the bit where he gets on board with the people in the truck,
Yes.
and they drive him for like 5 minutes, and then he just gets off, and you're just like, that didn't really achieve anything. Like, there's this kind of story inherently sort of has to have that a bit. Road trip movies, or people are stuck somewhere, they have to remain stuck somehow. But weirdly though, I don't know, it's so hard to, it's such a different beast, isn't it? 11 minutes to 80. Yeah.
So getting to some of the more specifics, I want to talk about a couple of different things that I thought were interesting about the movie. So specifically, the opening, the movie starts at the baby shower. Dee Dee is pregnant. We get to introduce to the whole family. I think one of the struggles they might have had here is that Rugrats had quite a wide supporting cast, and generally speaking, every episode of the show would only really have a couple of them in it. They were very rarely all around the whole family, because it's quite a large family. Only one of the grandparents lived with the kids and was regularly around to let them escape by falling asleep. Stu and Drew's dad is the worst and remains the worst as a
He's
parent.
one of the best characters in this movie.
Yeah, but his falling asleep, like it's so constant in the show. Like it was like because obviously 9 times out of 10 the babies have to escape and go somewhere, right, for the story to happen, and like they always would just put him with the granddad, have the granddad fall asleep. That was like the answer like 9 times out of 10 in the show. So the fact they did that here, I thought was quite funny. But the way this movie opens, and they do a really good job establishing who the babies are really quickly, and what their personalities are and how they relate to each other. Very quickly do we establish that through a little bit of a cheat with some Chucky voiceover, but it works. It's fine. It makes sense in the context of like a fake Indiana Jones parody, which, by the way, they got the real Indiana Jones music. How much did they pay for that? All I could think was cost when I heard that song. Every second of that song, I'm just like watching money burn. I'm like, Jesus, that wasn't cheap.
All I could think was, if this is the baby's collective imagination, have they seen Indiana Jones?
Holy shit, I didn't even think of that. They must have, right? Yeah, they've been in the room. Indiana Jones has been on the TV, and that's inspired them. I mean, often in the show, they were inspired by various like kids' books and other TV shows they would watch. So I guess that makes sense.
Yeah. But these kids should not be watching Indiana Jones, arguably.
Yeah, I guess. But specifically babies don't really. You assume they're not really taking in what they're seeing. So the idea that Tommy might have been in the room as a baby. Where because the parents and the kids can't understand each other, so there's that's kind of the point of the thing. They the babies. The premise of the show is the babies talk. Except for, I do wonder, what's the logic with Dill? Dill doesn't really talk, and the other babies can all talk, and they're literally called babies. They're
No, he does. He starts to more throughout the film, though, doesn't he? Like he calls Tommy Toto, which is him trying to say Tommy, and then by the end of the film, he calls him My Tommy. So he does. You're right. He learns to communicate throughout the movie.
Gotcha. Yeah, fair enough. So it kind of break the rules slightly with the Stu and Tommy scene, just slightly. Nadia didn't like that at all because she was like, no, they're not supposed to be able to communicate with each other. Like that's kind of the way the show always worked. But anyway, I thought it was really clever how they introduced the babies. I thought they did a good job re-establishing the characters for anyone who might be jumping in, or a parent that's coming into without having seen the show.
Let me jump and defend Stu and Tommy, because there's no indication from Stu's point of view that Tommy has definitely categorically understood him. I don't think people talk to their kids about like they can understand them. I think that's a common thing. The thing I take umbrage about in that scene more is him giving a baby a fucking compass. Like that's way worse than.
Well, it's a watch, isn't it? It's not a compass.
A watch, whatever it is. Well, okay, still a metal object with a chain should not be given to a baby. Is my point.
I guess that's probably about right. That's fair.
And a lot of the movie is pinned on that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny actually. I'm just remembering some trivia from earlier, but it's related to this. But I'll come back to it. It's fine. Because we do the trivia when we do the trivia, and there's not much trivia, so I don't want to start sprinkling trivia into the podcast, or we won't have a trivia section. There'll be nothing left. But I think they're less successful at introducing the wider family, and I could imagine somebody who either hasn't seen the show in a long time, or didn't watch the show religiously as a child, and therefore have these characters baked into their brain, being a bit like, who's this one? Who's married to who? Like, I think Chucky's dad gets like 2 lines in the whole movie, and like, you just go, maybe just have him in the background then. Because every time you give him a line, I'm going, like, I can imagine a parent being like, and who's this guy? I guess I think Chucky's dad's a bad example, actually, because Chucky's dad looks so much like he's clearly the father of that child. But some of the other adults, like Phil and Lil's parents, who again get a line or 2 each, particularly like her dad, Phil and Lil's dad, I think it's 1 line in the whole movie. I could imagine somebody being like, well, who's he supposed to be? Who's this guy with the big hair? Like, there are so many adults to introduce, and while they do a good job of setting up the key important story adults, particularly Stu and Drew, and their dad, the rest of the adults just get a couple of lines here and there, and it is kind of like you're expected to carry knowledge of the TV show in, I think, to a certain degree, to understand the family and the dynamic and who everyone is in relation to each other. And I think they try to cover it with the baby shower right at the beginning of the movie, and use that as an excuse to have everyone show up and be like, "Oh, it's my father. Oh, it's my mother." Like, trying to, establish the exact tree. It's not enough. It's not enough. So maybe you have less of the characters in it. Like, it's hard because the plot needs them to all be in it, doesn't it? Because all the parents need to be looking for the kids. So it's like, maybe less of the grandparents then. Have them be present but not speak. Just have the one grandparent, the one that lives with them, be involved. I don't know.
I'm okay with it, to be honest, because I think not having them is weirder. Like, where are these other parents hunting for these kids? Like, I think the baby shower thing is quite a fun, logical excuse to sort of get around it. And I think it's one of those, if you know the show, there's more texture to who those people are. But if you don't know the show, they're just the other kids' parents, and that's all right. Like, not everyone in a kids' movie needs a plot, do they? So I had less of an issue with that, to be honest.
Yeah, I guess it's more. I guess that is more me inventing a problem, because I'm sort of looking at that from like that view of like, oh God, if my parents watched this, what did they think of this? Were they making?
But
I'm trying to presume what the problems might be for that viewer.
I didn't have that memory. In fact, to the point where, so I was that guy for this. Like, when her dad is on, I'm like, is that the main grandpa? Like, that's how little I remembered the show watching this. And then I was like, oh no, it's not. Right. It's not the main grandpa. Yeah, but you just pick up who's who. Like,
Fair enough.
There's a really weird bit. I'd have to find it to check the dialogue because I've just looked it up. There's a really weird bit where Phil and Lil's mum refers to herself as Betty, I think. And I was like, is she a stepmom? Like, or something? But she's not. She's their actual mum, according to the Rugrats Wikipedia. So I found that was the only parent bit where I was confused.
Who called her Betty? Sorry, your line broke up slightly then.
I think she called herself Betty. Like, hold on. I think she says to...
Yeah, that's her name, isn't it?
Yeah, but she says she's talking to Phil and Lil at the time, and she says, your dad and Betty, or something. Maybe someone else is talking. I don't know. Maybe I'll look it up and see if I can work it out.
Yeah, that's strange. So the other thing I thought was funny, and it was a thing that I didn't understand as a kid, but understood understand now as an adult, Dr. Lipschitz being a quack. My memory was that Dr. Lipschitz in the show was a real, like, legit doctor that they referenced a lot in the show. It turns out Dr. Lipschitz is a running joke about quack doctors. Didn't get that as a kid. Only have realised that last night watching this movie. Led to a really funny joke that really cracked Nadia up, where they're talking about, in my day, you'd give birth to a baby in a potato field or whatever. They're like, oh, we've got a room for that. And they open a door and there's like a potato field birthing room, which is just so absurd, but so very funny.
And this must have been around the time that, like, alternative birthing stuff was really coming in. So I thought that whole sequence was very funny. And you sort of go, sorry, can we spend a bit more time exploring what's behind all the other doors?
Yes, please. Yeah.
What other crazy? So here we go. What other crazy birthing things are there? So I found it. So literally, she picks up Phil and Lil. She picks up one of them, and her I've got the subtitles on. Her line is, "We're here, Betty. Betty and Daddy are here." What? She's talking to them though. So you think it would be mum and dad? If she's calling him Daddy, why is she first naming herself as Betty?
I don't remember. Maybe there was some sort of running joke that she'd never called herself Mum then. Maybe she always called herself Betty.
Maybe. Because I was like, oh, cool, they've got like a stepmom. That's really interesting. And then I've just looked at the Rugrats Wikipedia.
No, I would have clarified for you. She's definitely their biological mum. But yeah. Interesting.
Anyway.
I really like the Angelica character. I've always loved the Angelica character. I like how manipulative she is. And I love how clever she actually is as well. She's the only one of the babies. Because she's in that middle age. This is such a clever idea as well, because she's the bridge between the babies and the adults. Because she's still young enough to be able to communicate with the babies, but she's old enough to be able to communicate with the adults too. And she's the only character that can do that. And that whole thing where she's manipulating Tommy for her own amusement to not like Dill, and then just a couple scenes later, she's manipulating the two brothers to fight for her own amusement, Stu and Drew, because she has that brilliant line about can I see the horse? And Drew's like, we don't have... Oh, no, Stu's like, we don't have a horse. And she's like, oh, that's funny, because my mommy told me that Aunt Dee Dee got saddled with a loser. Which is... just one, a good joke, a funny line. Like, that's like a proper zing, like brilliant. But two, that's so manipulative, because then the two brothers start immediately fighting, and I'm like, this child is smarter than all of you. You've just been manipulated by a 5-year-old, or however old she's supposed to be.
For the sake of discussion, though, do you think the movie slightly doesn't know what to do with her?
Yes. Oh, in the plot sense, 100%. Yeah, in terms of her interaction with the various characters in the scenes, absolutely perfect, like almost antagonist. The reality of it, not so much. And I think the actual answer is maybe don't do the wolf and have Angelica be the villain somehow in the woods. Like, have her be angry at the babies. Maybe Cynthia's arm comes off, and like in the woods, she's the threat. The babies are just left alone by the wildlife, maybe keep the monkeys maybe for the fun times, but like, this idea, this wolf is like the villain, quote unquote, but it's barely in the movie. I don't know about that.
No, I didn't like the wolf thing. I thought the wolf was kind of just there throughout the movie, and I think I like what they did with Angelica. I get why Angelica can't be with the babies for the whole thing, but because she's so antagonistic in the show that it's sort of how do you make that work without her seeming like an arsehole or something? But it's kind of a bit like, oh, and Angelica's chasing them. like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So now we've got to believe that there's a crazy sense of circumstances where two different sets of children get lost in this wood, which reminds me of the very funny scene where Stu and Grandpa are chasing after the babies, and they're actually in the van in front of them, and the van lid pops up, and he sees them, but he's not looking at them.
That's good.
It's good stuff.
There are a bunch of really good jokes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think the Angelica as a character certainly not having much of a plot presence, but they do really understand that character. And I think they still have brilliant use of her weird manipulation. And she's only 3, I've just looked up. I was like, what is she, like 5? I looked her up. She's 3. She's supposed to be 3. She's smarter than all of these adults in many ways. Right, I had to talk about this, Chris. This is my notes. Did you... Okay, I wrote 2 words, Chris. I'm not proud of it, but it's what's in the movie. And then I wrote, I didn't expect to have to write those words today. So I'm going to say the 2 words out loud on their own, and then I'm going to let you talk about it, because I don't know I can. Piss rainbow.
Say that again.
Piss rainbow.
Oh, when the babies are all peeing in the scene in the. Huh?
Yep.
Yeah.
We expecting to
it's
see
a
a
weird
piss
scene.
rainbow, Chris?
There's a lot in this film that I wasn't expecting to see. But no, I was not expecting to see a rainbow of piss. But I kind of had a view by that point. It was so like, all right, anything goes in these fucking musical numbers. Then fine, you want to have a bunch of kids pissing. All right, fine, whatever. Like, yeah, it's just it's almost like, and I'm not defending them here. Oh, I really don't want to come up with an explanation that slightly defends them. But you know your notion of the kind of the fantasy sequences that we don't get in the show, you know, their interpretation of things. Mm-hmm. It's almost like the musical numbers act as that in this film. Because, you know, the musical numbers contain some really, well, you know, we've got monkeys singing for one. You know, there's some stuff that just doesn't, you know, there's certainly some fantasy elements to those musical numbers, isn't there? That'll make me feel better about one of my other notes, which is if Dill can't talk and we're accepting that babies just can't immediately talk, why can all those babies that have just been born in the hospital all talk and sing, actually? Yes, yeah. So I sort of felt it was sort of a fantasy musical number sequence, and so if you frame it like that, if there's got to be a piss rainbow anywhere, you might as well have a piss rainbow there. Then I guess
if you frame it like that, then you have a lot of questions about these children and their imaginations because they dreamt up piss rainbow.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's fair.
I have, piss rainbow, not happy. Didn't like that.
They also, what is the song the monkeys sing? Because they also dreamt up that.
Oh no, that's a real song, isn't it? That's Witch Doctor. That's a real song.
No, but it's not a song traditionally sung by monkeys, is it?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So yeah, we haven't talked much about the monkeys either.
Well, what do you say about the monkeys? It's a confusing thing. Like the movie.
But I feel that way. That's how I feel about Piss Rainbow.
Yeah, you're right. Like, there's no actual answer. There's no analysis to have. It's Piss Rainbow and singing monkeys. I don't know what you want from me. Yeah, the monkeys are strange. Basically, if anyone doesn't remember, there's a circus train, and the two guys who run it are very funny. They're an amusing group, and they're arguing over who watches the monkeys while the other one gets coffee, and then they decide, well, we both want coffee, we'll both get coffee, and while they're doing that, the monkeys escape. But they don't just escape, they crash the train into the forest, which is insane. And he's really just there to give the movie scale and visual. It's moments like that I'm like, no, this is not Rugrats. Can't the monkeys have just escaped then, at the very least? Just have them get out of the cage somehow. Or even as a little nod to the show, use a screwdriver to unhook something like Tommy used to do. And then they're out. They've not crashed a train, which just feels like way too big for this. Yeah.
Do you think everything they did with the monkeys, in terms of the monkey stealing deal, the monkeys being a threat while they were in the cave, do you think they could have done all of that with the wolf?
They could have, but I guess you don't really need to do that with a wolf, because the thing with the wolf is a wolf would be in those. The reason they've had to go to the extreme of it's a circus and stuff is because there's no woods in suburban America that's full of monkeys.
Do you think the monkeys are the ultimate case of us 30-year-old men are going, what the fuck's up with these monkeys? But actually, kids probably fucking love those monkeys.
Well, yes and no, because I think you're right in that their entertainment value in the movie would mostly be appreciated by children, because they're silly, zany, very over-characterized, characters. But I do think from a practical level, they represent my earlier issue with the film, which is this weird insistence on scaling. The kids might have imagined monkeys like this in an episode of the show, but they never faced physically anything like this. And the movie has to bend over backwards to make them exist, right? It has to have a train crash into the woods, which already, from a scale perspective, just feels way bigger than anything the show ever would have done. You know, way less grounded than anything the show ever would have done. And I think I would have even been more accepting of it if it was just the monkeys escaped, because then you draw that parallel of the kids are always escaping, the monkeys have escaped, and you could double that parallel up by having a screwdriver used. Because Tommy used to have a screwdriver he kept in his nappy that he used to pull out, and he would just use it to pull up the clip. He wouldn't actually use it as a screwdriver; like he would just use it as a long stick to put between the gates on his baby pen and open it from the inside, which I always thought was very funny and very, quite cute and quite a good visual. And they didn't do it in the movie, which surprised me, because they actually have them break out of a pen by just pushing it over at one point, and I was like, oh, you could have done the classic. Tommy has a screwdriver in his nappy, which I always loved because I like the idea that parents would keep changing his nappy and going, Dee Dee, there's also a screwdriver inside this nappy. Should we? I have questions. And actually, thinking about it, it might have been even a toy screwdriver, which is even funnier. Like a plastic one.
Yeah.
So I think there's just ways you could have done it that would have made the movie feel a bit more subtle and a bit less bombastic for no reason. And but I agree with you in terms of the entertainment value. The reason you put the monkeys in the movie is to have those zany visuals for the young'uns, and I'm sure young Dan loved that too.
Yeah, I suspect he did, and I suspect young Chris probably wasn't as irritated by them as older Chris. But I think it's.
While we're on the subject of the monkeys, though, I have a question for you about their use in the movie, because the monkeys end up representing a situation where the monkeys keep going for Dill and taking Dill, and the other babies, the sort of end of the second act low point is the other babies are sick of Dill. Dill got them into this situation. They're lost in the woods. They're fed up of him. He's crying all the time. He's a real shit, to be honest with you. That scene with him and Tommy under the tree, when he drinks all of the milk and then doesn't let Tommy have any blanket, is like, oh, yeah, Christ, yeah, I'd be thinking about letting the monkeys take this baby right about now. What a selfish little shit. If we had the Knobhead Hall of Fame on this podcast, Chris, I'd be thinking about putting Dill in it, We have for anyone who doesn't know, Knobhead Hall of Fame is a running segment on our Analyzing Avatar podcast where we take a character that's really pissed us off that week and we get to put them in the Knobhead Hall of Fame. So I'm looking at the Dill situation, and then there's the way the plot coalesces, for those who don't remember, is Tommy gets really to his low point. His friends have abandoned him because they were sick of Dill. Dill isn't treating him very well. He is still stuck in the woods, and this has all been in the aid of him helping and trying to get Dill home, And he even talks about, because they have this whole thing where they're going to use a wish if they can meet the lizard, and they'll use the wish to get home. But Tommy's talking about using the wish earlier on in the movie to get his brother back once the monkeys have kidnapped him. But he gets his brother back, and now he's just on his own with his brother. His brother's pissing him off, and there's this moment, this really insane moment where it gets so dramatic. He's going to he picks up a can of a jar of banana baby food, and he's about to pour it on Dill to encourage the monkeys to take him. And the movie treats it like he's got a gun to the child's head. It is so dramatic. The music picks up. It's during a storm. It's raining. There's lightning. Tommy's face is all lit like evil. And then he changes his mind, and it's like a sweet moment. My question for you, Chris, and the reason I wanted to talk about this scene is just was that too much? Did they go too far with that? Is that not seen not overly dramatic for the rest of the movie? It's so much. I don't know. Did you think they earned that? I don't know.
It's difficult because I remember thinking, shit, that's dark.
Yeah, it's a really dark scene.
I remember thinking, God, they're really. Yeah, and in terms of annoyance of that scene, it was more the flipping around. You know what I mean? It starts with Tommy being, I've got responsibility, and then Dill annoys him, so he's like, right, well, fuck it, I'm gonna feed Dill to these wild animals, and then all lovey again. And you've then got Dill sharing the blanket and stuff. So it was more the flip-flopping of Tommy's relationship with Dill.
Yeah, because the flip-flopping and the character shifting is fine, but they don't really earn it any time, do they?
No, because they do, because it all happens so quickly. In terms of whether it's too dark or dramatic, I think the difficulty is every time this movie is, let's call it, doing another genre. So every time it's being a musical, every time it's being an adventure movie where you've got, like, you know, the climax of this film is monkeys chasing the raptor and the wolf, and you know, and Stu's in a whatever that thing is, like in a bird plane thing, and he's crashing, and you've got this, you know, I mean, the fight between Spike and the wolf. Another amazing joke when Angelica says that Spike was a baby called Paul or something. That it's now a dog because he got rejected when Tommy came home.
Yeah,
like, and even then, you know, you know, some moments where Spike's fighting the wolf. The moment where Tommy sings, as we both complimented, the song about how he wants his mum and dad to love him, and it cuts to him curled up in the corner, you know, crying this out, and you know, his mum and dad walking away from him, and then we cut outside and the dogs howling in the rain. Whenever this movie does a genre and goes, this scene is going to be this, they go all in. Like, they really go all in on it. And as much as I also watched it and went, fucking hell, this is a bit dark, a bit far. Actually, I think it's just doing that again. Like, it's just going all in on this, you know, on this notion, on this extreme. But it's pretty dark.
Yeah, it really is. You're right, though. Actually, I guess the movie is almost like parodying that kind of thing in those scenes. I think we've accidentally, maybe not accidentally, but we've hit on, I think, one of the bigger issues though is with the flip flopping and the changing. It's like it's never earned in two senses. It's never earned in that it's all done really quickly. Like, so it's just even if there's a good explanation for why the character has changed their mind, we don't explore it enough to really ever understand it. So it just feels like they've changed their mind out of nowhere. But sometimes there's literally no explanation as well. So in that moment when Tommy is holding up the banana, he's just like looking at Dill and then just goes, "No, I can't do it," or whatever. And then they're just friends again. It's like, well, what happened? What changed right there? Like, the character.
I think he looks at his. It's not enough, but I think he looks at his reflection and he realizes who he's become.
Oh, you're right.
That he's made Dill this upset, and that goes against, you know, what his dad was telling him and all that sort of stuff.
Right. You're right. It's not enough.
You definitely hit upon an issue.
The fact that I'd forgotten that was there, it tells you a lot about how quickly that happens.
Because the movie's trying to do the movie's trying to be a parody movie, but it's not. It's trying to be a musical, but it's not. It's trying to be about this thing, but it's not. You know, the movie's, it's trying to do an awful lot, this film.
Is it? Do you think it's just overcompensating? Do you think they were just so worried about scaling up Rugrats they overcompensated?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah, possibly.
That's kind of what I've been thinking about as we've been talking about it. I think, I don't know if we go back to overall thoughts. Have you got anything more specific about any of the individual sequences or scenes to talk about?
Apologies there. I hit a lamp, by the way, so I imagine that was quite noisy.
Yeah, I could hear it. And I was thinking, like, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm either imagining that or, like, it's fine.
No, I went to get my drink, which I'm trying to be really careful because I've put ice in it, so I'm really conscious of that being loud, and I managed to, like, nudge my chair and a lamp, so apologies. No, I've got no. I to be honest with you, mate, there was a point in this podcast where I was like, "Oh boy, like we have talked about this, and we are really pushing the boundaries of what I thought we had to say about this movie." And I looked at the time, and it was 36 minutes into the recording, and I was like, "Oh, we got to do a bit more."
Yeah. I can flip through my last notes then and see if there's anything in there worth pulling apart before we give sort of overall thoughts. Love the use of the intro. To have the show's intro be there, but in the center of the screen, have it get wider, and then when Tommy squirts the bottle, it goes poof when it goes full. That's great. I enjoyed that. That's clever. Really nicely done. I liked when we had that brief, traditional Rugrats fantasy sequence at the beginning. When they were trying to get the golden monkey idol thing off the statue, there's a brief moment when it flickers and you see it's a banana split or a nut banana sundae. And then when we cut to the real world, they are in front of the fridge and it really was like an ice cream with a banana in it. That's like, so we got a little glimpse of it in the thing. and then we see the real thing. I thought that was pretty clever. I did like the way they handled Tommy's being neglected, because it didn't feel... Because that's such a hard thing to do without making the parents seem like monsters. Does that make sense? Like, you need to make his parents be understandable and relatable, but you also need Tommy to feel like he's been a bit neglected. So that scene when he just wants to be read to, you go, well, they were reading to him. They just... The other kids, like... got a more urgent, like he's crying and won't sleep. Like you understand how the parents got distracted, you know. And even though it's absolutely heartbreaking when Tommy is just stood holding up the book and they're ignoring him,
it's horrific.
You know why? You would like you don't ever
genuinely.
Go on.
No, you go.
Well, I was just gonna say the parents they never look like bad parents. Was my point. But go on. What were you gonna say?
Yeah. Mate, when that scene played, I nearly came upstairs and grabbed a teddy bear to watch this movie with. Like, I was literally like, it's heartbreaking. It is, and I think as well you can, as well as defending the parents there. I think, you know, I know I've said this a few times now, but I think if you're a parent, a lot of the Dill irritations is just waved away with, he's a baby. He doesn't know he's being a twat.
Right, absolutely.
So I think Dill is also less irritating, probably, if you've had more exposure to kids. I like you, was like, fucking hell, Dill. And I also thought about Knobhead Hall of Fame whilst watching it. But I think...
We have historically put one baby in the Knobhead Hall of Fame, if you remember. But I won't go into the details of that, because that's a core...
Yeah, if memory serves, I got a lot of shit. I got a lot of grief for that from you. And you're just like, but this baby's a real twat.
Well, here's the thing, Chris. I said I thought about it. I didn't say I'd do it.
No, and I don't think we should do it, because it is presented as he's just a baby. But I think that resonates probably better if you've had kid or are a young kid around babies or that sort of stuff.
Yeah, agreed.
This is probably the biggest incident of us reviewing a movie that truly isn't for us.
Right? Yeah, this is yeah, absolutely, that's true. Like, because we're not young enough to still be enjoying the more childish stuff, and there's a lot of stuff about being a parent in here that I think would hit harder if the person reviewing it was a parent. Yeah, I agreed. Like the reference to the show with Phil and Lil when they did that. That's my Reptar, Lillian. Mine, Philip, is not. And they just pull it back and forth. That was a fun little reference to the show. They did that every week, and it's not overdone here. It's just a little nod, and it's very funny. I always enjoy seeing them argue those two. We talked about this. Oh, the taking Dill back because of a money back guarantee is fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
I will hear nothing against that joke. That's a great joke. I had a question for you, Chris, in my notes to ask you. Where did I ask you this? Do babies have super strength? Because nobody seems to be able to take anything off Dill once he's got hold of it, including his parents.
Yeah, I think that's the notion. Super strength Dill. I think you nailed it.
Okay, so he's like a super baby.
That's my theory.
Gotcha. I like the little detail, and you might not have noticed because I'd never noticed it till this viewing. Angelica obviously sings a version of One Way or Another later on in the movie, but in the early parts of the movie when she's just trying to watch TV, there's a brief bit when you can hear One Way or Another playing from the TV in the background.
Oh, that's
thus
good. That's
inspiring her song choice later on. So you know where this 3-year-old got that song from.
Yeah.
Great detail.
That's well done.
Great detail. I quite like the Reptar cart. I think it's quite iconic. I think it's prominent in the front of the poster. I think it's a good design. It makes it explains how they end up lost in the woods to some degree. It shields it's just a clever both visual and practical element of the script that I enjoy. I did care less for the Reptar rap that plays while they're running around the city in Reptar, which is another one of those scenes that I just thought was taking the realism and the world of the film just too far, when they're just like babies in a Reptar car. It's like driving over like motorways and through the city and getting caught on stuff and like grinding on elements of parks and like just goes this insane journey and doesn't ever stop. And I'm just thinking, like, at some point, momentum will surely not keep taking this. Like, this can't just keep going. But it did. I didn't like it.
Yeah, the real world logistics of that pram thing are nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. I very much liked the joke, I guess we'll have to change his diaper, and Phil being like, what do you mean we? That's a great joke. Yeah. I wrote that joke down. I enjoyed it. I laughed out loud. Nadia caught one that slipped through my net, which is when Dee Dee suggests that their grandpa slept through Pearl Harbor as a reason why, like, we shouldn't leave the kids with him. To which he has the most ambiguous response I've ever heard, which is, I sounded the alarm as soon as I could, because what Nadia pointed out was, is he talking about the babies, or is he talking about Pearl Harbor?
No, I think my interpretation of that is he's absolutely talking about Pearl Harbor. Like, you want to talk about subtle darkness in this movie, there's a suggestion that the grandpa is responsible for Pearl Harbor. It's insane. I'm sorry, I think that's the kind of thing that a parent is not getting from other properties.
Yeah,
so, which is why I
don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. That's a great joke.
I think a parent, and there's lots of them in this. Like, I think a parent would. It's the reason I think Toy Story works. Do you know what I mean? Like, especially Toy Story 2. Toy Story 2's got, like, a lot of fun stuff for parents in, and I think, at least that's my memory of it. I remember my mum specifically saying that. And I think this is the case for this film.
Yeah. Speaking of Disney, I like that they do a scene where there's a bunch of, like, Disney-esque drawn animals having a peaceful drink at a little sort of like watering hole, and then it's interrupted by the chaos of this movie. It's a small visual gag, but it is definitely a little nod at Disney, and it works quite well. Are you doing some sawing there, Chris? You chopping up some wood?
Oh, sorry, I was itching my eye. Sorry, but obviously
wow.
It's really,
so listeners won't have heard that the way I could hear that, but whatever Chris was doing was like scratching at his headphones, which was making to my ears because we're speaking to you through headphones. I was just hearing like it sounded like someone sawing through wood. That was amazing.
So the explanation would be I felt like I had a bit of like something in my eye, like I don't know, sleep or whatever. So I was itching my eye, but I was itching my eye with my t-shirt, which meant that I was sort of pulling the on reflection, pulling the t-shirt directly over the microphone bit of the headphones, then just rubbing.
That would explain why that was happening. That makes sense.
Yeah. Apologies.
No, it's fine. That's absolutely fine. I made a couple of quick notes here about this because I just thought this is very funny. I like the news guy, Rex something. I like him deliberately causing arguments and manipulating things in an Angelica-esque way. And I liked the joke that he was utterly incapable of getting the names of the children right. That joke didn't get old. I thought it would, but it just kept going and it never stopped making me laugh.
I cannot see how Die Hard wasn't the reference for that.
Oh, that's a good point.
It's basically the same beats, and I was like, "Oh, this absolutely feels like they went. Let's do what they did in Die Hard with the reporter."
Yes,
and like I don't mind it. I'm not mad at that. Like I'm fine with that. But it just made me. It reminded me so much because we watched Die Hard over Christmas, and it just reminded me so much of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. The Tommy joke where his nappy falls down while he's giving a big impassioned speech. That's weird. I didn't understand it. I didn't get it. That. It was just strange. There's no punchline. It just sort of happens. Maybe kids found that funny. I don't know. Weird. I also liked the very fun little line where someone's talking about Little Red Riding Hood, and someone's like, "The wolf ate the girl," and Phil's response was just, "Well, they got her out, like obviously." I thought that was a really funny joke. I enjoyed that. I like there's a joke that purely relies on knowledge of the show when someone says, "Chucky, this time we really are all doomed," because in the show,
I enjoyed that. Yeah,
the number of times Chucky was like, "We're doomed, all doomed," and then he'd never like They've never actually been true because they were always just like, somewhere really normal, just imagining danger. I thought that was great.
It's so weird with Chucky, isn't it? Because they sort of, let's not forget, we've not talked about this. The movie is narrated by Chucky at the beginning and the end. And there's this weird, if you were to just see that first scene in isolation and that last scene in isolation, you would assume the film is about Chucky learning to be brave. That's not really what the film's about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he does come back to save the day at the end. I mean, they all get a save the day moment in the last sequence, don't they?
Yeah.
Even Dill gets to come. Even Dill gets to come save the day in the end.
Yeah, but it's not what the film's about. Like, do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's that thing of it's trying to be a musical. It's trying to be a parody. It's trying to be Chucky's story. It's trying to be Tommy and Dill's story. You know what I mean? It's just trying to do. It's trying to do a lot. Again, to repeat that.
Yeah. I liked that I didn't know she could fly joke. I think that was in the trailer. I feel like I remember that joke being like
I like that.
Like in the trailer, like as a big punchline that Angelica flies up. I didn't know she could fly. It's good. It's a good joke. I really love the stuff they do with Spike in this movie. Spike's the dog. For anyone who doesn't remember, his plot in the movie, first of all, is that he immediately goes off to retrieve the babies when they get lost. Angelica tags along with him, and that's how she gets brought into the plot, despite not having left with them originally. He successfully tracks them down. Then he protects them from the wolf and has this really brutal scene where you think he might have died. But I genuinely did. I was like, Nadia and I both were like, I think Nadia said it first, but we were both thinking it. She's like, did they really just kill off the dog? Like, we actually thought there was a chance they might have done that. And it's such effective drama.
Here's a huge compliment to this movie that we haven't played it yet, but I think absolutely stands. This is a children's movie that, as an adult, I couldn't predict and see where it was going. But most of the time, it went to surprising places that were also logical. That moment where Tommy chooses to ask the lizard for them to have their dog back is heartbreaking, surprising, because I'm there going, well, Stu is the lizard, so he's going to say, we want to find our parents, and then Stu's going to pop out, and they're going to be like, wow, that happened fast. But then the dog thing has so much more. Arguably, maybe we needed to see the dog a little more, maybe, to really kind of have that hit home. But like, it's just this. Nobody can say this movie is predictable, and considering it's a kids' movie from the 90s, that's quite an achievement.
Yeah, and that's why I feel like what you should have done is had Angelica and the dog come with them originally, so they could have spent the movie with the dog, like the dog constantly protecting them and them loving the dog. Because then their choice to save Spike over going home is a tiny bit more earned, maybe. But it doesn't really need to be a lot more earned, because obviously Spike just spent the last act of the movie saving them from the wolf.
And then you could do this really cool thing where, because as much as Dill's being a pain in the arse, Phil and Lil especially come across a bit harsh.
Yeah.
If you have Angelica be the one that takes Phil, Lil, and Chucky away from Dill and is manipulating that situation because she's just annoyed by this young baby crying all the time, like, that's you know what I mean? You could actually. I'm beginning to change my mind slightly on my whole. I can see why Angelica's not in the situation, because the notion that Angelica is the one manipulating the situation.
Yeah.
Because that Angelica's manipulating the situation because Tommy doesn't even want to. She's trying to annoy Tommy, and Tommy can't be annoyed anymore because he's looking after Dill. So actually, it's a slight, not to add another fucking plot, but it's a slight Angelica's jealous of Tommy, and actually maybe you don't particularly do the Chucky thing. You do that with Angelica instead.
Yeah, that would have been better, I think.
Anyway, and then you could have done some Spike stuff, or more Spike stuff.
Agreed. I think I agree. I don't have anything to add to that. I just think that's exactly right. That's probably that would have been more effective, I think. Last couple of notes. Angelica's mum throwing away her phone was deeply unearned within the movie. It's a good payoff if you remember the show, but it's not earned here at all. So, bad movie.
Yep, confused the fuck out of me, if I'm honest.
So in the show, the mum was very unattentive. It's one of the reasons Angelica acts out. Is kind of it's what the show implies is that her mother is not engaged with her. Always on her phone, always doing her business, her business. So her throwing away the phone because her daughter's been lost and she's sort of found a new person. Just not earned within this movie at all. No, very bad. I do like during the ending though when everyone's being reunited, even the monkeys get reunited with their kids. I think that's cute. I like that. Everyone gets a happy ending, even the monkeys. Oh no, it's not the monkeys getting reunited with their children. It's the monkeys being reunited with the two guys, right? The two coffee guys,
with the circus guys. Yeah.
And then I wanted to ask you this, Chris. Did you see the post-credit scene?
Oh no, I forgot. I did know there was one. I can't remember how, but I did know there was one.
Would you like me to describe you the post-credit scene?
Yeah.
So the babies are in the middle of the house, and the door opens, and you see these feet coming through, and then the camera pans up, and it's Nick Fury, and he invites them to join the Avengers Initiative.
I mean, that's clearly not the post-credit scene, is it?
No, the post-credit scene is an absolute pointless waste of everyone's time. The grandpa is in the reptile pram, and it gets knocked, and it starts rolling down the street with the grandpa in it, and the dog chases. That's the post-credit scene.
Oh, that's quite fun. I'd fucking love to watch that movie.
Or the grandpa lost in the woods with the dog.
The grandpa lost in the woods. Fuck yeah.
Trying to find the lizard. I do like the grandpa character.
He's brilliant. He's so funny in this.
Yeah, he is. He's very good. He was on one of the highlights of the show too, I feel. Right, let's do the triv. Chris, do your thing.
Let's triv it up.
That hurt.
Never mind. Wish I hadn't done that so loud. Let's triv it up.
Triv it up. I'm going to give you some trivia. So let's do the thing. There's not much trivia for this one, so I'll go through it. I might as well go through it as quick as I can. Just get it, get on. It's just one of those movies that just like there's not a lot of like documentation of the production, so there's not a lot of interesting stuff to tackle. I pulled out the stuff that I thought was worth talking about though. So the events of this film take place between the 5th and 6th seasons of the show. It was the first film based on it being on a Nicktoon. And I think what's interesting about this is like my memory of it, and I could be wrong, is that the 5th series of the show ended with the reveal that Dee Dee was pregnant. So they literally knew they were doing the movie, knew what the premise of the movie was, and embedded it into the show. And then obviously Dill was a part of the show after that. They do something similar with the second Rugrats movie, Rugrats in Paris, where there's characters introduced there that become a permanent fixture of the show following that movie. So yeah, maybe we'll get to that one day. Apparently Rugrats in Paris is better.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that in a minute. But plans for the Rugrats film adaptation, along with Ren and Stimpy and Doug, began when Nickelodeon made a contract with 20th Century Fox to make the movies in 1993, or between 1993 and 1995. So Nickelodeon reached out to Fox and were like, let's do movies on our products, Doug, Rugrats, and Ren and Stimpy, and that deal was all signed. But no films got produced. There was, I guess, just production, like not even production, development disagreements. They never quite got any project off the ground, and the contract actually expired in 1995. During that time, when the contract had been at Fox, Viacom, who own Nickelodeon, purchased Paramount Pictures. So the minute that contract with Fox expired, they then started developing films in-house, essentially, through Paramount. It makes me wonder if the reason the movies hadn't really happened at Fox is once Viacom acquired Paramount, they were like, let the Fox thing die on its own, and we'll make our own. So that's what happened. The movie eventually got released through Paramount. It was originally planned to be released in 99, but they pulled it back, Chris, to 98, because they didn't want to compete with The Iron Giant, the English dub of Pokemon the first movie, Toy Story 2, and South Park, bigger, longer, and uncut.
It's probably a fair thinking.
Yeah, quite a lot of absolute classics came out in 1999, it turns out. Yeah, shocking. So, it was a smart move in the end, because the movie actually grossed about 140 million. Its budget was 24. Oh, wow. 24 million
Nice.
spent, 140 million returned. Although this movie did receive very, very mixed reviews from critics.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in 2000, a sequel, Rugrats in Paris, was released. It too was a box office success, but this one gained a more positive critical reception. So the second one got according to the Triv, the second one got a much more positive critical reception. In 2003, Rugrats Go Wild was released, which is a crossover between Rugrats and the Wild Thornberrys. It was actually the least successful of the Rugrats films, both critically and commercially. But the Rugrats film trilogy in total has grossed $299 million.
Fair play. I mean, you can't deny that, can you? That's quite the number.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. A lot of money.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Right, I'm going to read you a piece of trivia, Chris. And every sentence of this trivia gets weirder than the last, so I just want you to be ready for this one. So Dill, the baby Dill, was originally going to be voiced by Madonna. Right?
Yeah.
They had Tara Strong in, famous voice actor Tara Strong, one of the Powerpuff Girls, also Harley Quinn in the original Batman animated series. She came in and recorded what's known as a scratch voice track for the character, which is a track to animate to before the actor comes in and does the real thing. Her impression of a baby crying was so accurate it caused a woman in the room who had just had a baby to start lactating. Thus, Madonna was out, and Tara Strong got the role.
Oh, what an incredible piece of trivia that just you can't share. Do you know what I mean? Imagine you at work tomorrow trying to share that. Like, all right, guys, you know the Rugrats movie? Why was I watching the Rugrats? All right, do a podcast. Like, that's not relevant. Like, you know Madonna, right? Do you remember Dill? Dill was the baby in the... No, they were all babies, but in the Rugrats movie, Dill was... it's the whole thing. That is so incredible, but very much for us and the listeners that have stuck with this entire podcast.
Yeah. I sometimes I get trivia and I look at it and I go, is this accurate? Is this completely true? And I Google it to try and find out. I didn't with that one. I don't want to know. Don't comment. Don't email. If you can look that up and find out that's completely false, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
Don't want to hear it.
Yeah,
I want to go to my grave believing that.
That is fantastic.
Yeah, it's good. The news anchor, whose name is Rex Pester, his original name, before they called him Rex Pester, was Scoop Hunter, which is also pretty good.
Nice. Very nice.
During the Harry Potter movies, Daniel Radcliffe went through 160 pairs of glasses. During the Harry Potter movies, Daniel Radcliffe went through about 81s. No, I'm kidding. I made that one up. I have no idea if that's true. So Tim Curry, actor Tim Curry, does a voice in all three Rugrats movies. In this one, he voices the reporter Rex Pester. In Rugrats in Paris, he apparently voices a singing sumo wrestler. And then, of course, in Rugrats Go Wild, he voices Nigel Thornberry, because that's the character he voiced on the TV show The Wild Thornberrys. So that's a crossover.
Do you think
was going to happen?
Do you think the starting point for the crossover was we've run out of other people for him to play?
Yeah.
Let's just bring the Thornberrys in. Why not?
Yeah. I loved the Wild Thornberrys. I wonder if over the course of the years we do this, maybe we'll eventually get to that one. We'll do Paris in a couple of years, and then we'll do Thornberrys eventually.
I never watched The Wild Thornberrys, so that to me as a premise for a film just feels like a film with way too many characters to be succinct and enjoyable. But I may be wrong.
Well, maybe that'd be an interesting experiment, because I love both shows. I remember really enjoying The Wild Thornberrys, so I'd be curious to see. I don't think I ever saw that one. I think by the time the movie that crossed the two over came out, I was a little too old for it and less interested. But thinking back now, remembering that I loved both those shows as a kid at different points, the idea of them coming together is kind of interesting. I don't know. I'm intrigued by its existence rather than, desperate to watch it. So maybe we'll come back to that.
Yeah, that's fair.
This movie actually kind of weirdly worked as a backdoor pilot for adding expanded members of the cast to the show, starting with Dill, and then the Paris movie added like 2 or 3 quite major characters too. This movie also acted as a test for the series switching to a widescreen format, which happened between the 2 seasons this movie is set.
Chucky gets a brother or sister, doesn't he?
In the second movie, yes, correct.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So that in this movie they add Tommy gets little brother. In the next movie they do Chucky's dad falls in love and the lady has a child.
Right. Nice.
So, yeah.
Very nice.
I remember that being quite a sweet story actually. Oof, God, between the two of us, Chris. It's gonna be a nightmare to edit.
Yeah, between the two of us, this is a pleasant listening for future Dan.
Yeah, horrible. One of the reporters asked the Pickles, "Is it true a dingo ate your baby?" This is a bizarrely dark reference to a real life story where a lady. I'm misremembering this story, but the lady, I think she was called. Let me look. Yeah, okay. This lady, Linda Chamberlain Cretan, she claimed a dingo ate her baby. And she ended up going into a trial for the death of this baby, and I think in the end it turned out a dingo really did eat her baby, and like they just hadn't believed her. I might be misremembering that story, but I think that's the story. It's really weird that they made a reference to that in this movie because that's quite a sad, dark thing. Even if it turned out the lady did kill the baby and it wasn't, as I remember it, that a dingo really did eat her baby and no one believed her. What a weird story to reference in this film.
Well, I think Seinfeld sort of made it a bit of a thing. There's an episode of Seinfeld where Julia
Louis-Dreyfus
she gets drunk, and the Elaine character yells it at someone, and it was like really. I think that clip really like it's one of those iconic moments from the show. So maybe they're more referencing the Seinfeld thing than they are the actual thing. But that's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so strange. Yeah, there you go. So I've just looked it up. Both parents were absolved of crime when a coroner found the remains of the baby inside of a dingo.
You know something crazy? There's fucking hell.
Oh, no. They found the remains of the baby having been eaten by a dingo. So they didn't find it inside the dingo. My bad.
So there's a list, and it doesn't even include Rugrats. So in Evil Angels, a character played by Meryl Streep exclaims it. In the Seinfeld episode The Stranded, Elaine uses the phrase. In the 1994 movie The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, one of the characters depicts a famous woman with a baby, and it's basically Linda Chamberlain is the answer. Buffy the Vampire Slayer has a reference to it.
Yep.
Family Guy has a reference to it, and Kevin from The Office, when trying to speak in an Australian accent, makes a reference by saying, "I like ice cream too, alligators and dingo babies."
Jeez. I know what's crazy about all these like jokey references. Like I think the Buffy one is, I think it's Seth Green's character. His character's in a band called Dingoes Ate My Baby or something like that.
Yeah, Oz belonged to a band called Dingoes Ate My Baby.
There you go.
This is like nuts how it's just become popular culture.
Despite the fact this is a really sad, tragic story of a lady who lost her baby to a fucking dingo attack. Like that's awful. Anyway, just stop making jokes about it, people. I feel like, wow. Anyway, Paul Germain, who at the time who had worked on the show, been part of the creative team that created the show. He'd left Nickelodeon at the time of the movie being produced and was working with Disney. He was asked about the movie. He had mixed feelings on it, basically. He didn't particularly hate or disown it, but he did have a few problems with it, thinking that some moments, such as Stu giving the watch to Tommy, didn't work for him, as the babies and adults weren't supposed to be able to communicate, and that he was upset that now Dill was introduced at the beginning, because that meant Tommy was no longer the youngest. He liked the idea that Tommy was always the youngest. Sure, I don't have too much feelings on that, but yeah. That's his perspective on it. That makes sense to me.
But I think, hold on. So remind me, he was a producer, or is it the actor who played Tommy?
No, this is the guy that originally worked. He like one of the creators, basically, of the original show. He'd moved on to Disney by the time the movie was being made. So he wasn't. He was listed as an executive producer, but it feels like that was just because he'd created it originally. He didn't really. It doesn't sound like he had a lot to do with the movie. And when he finally was asked about like, what did you think of it? He didn't care for it for the reasons mentioned.
Right. I think if you move on from a show, you've got to let the current creators do what they need to do for the longevity of the show, and that's they made a decision that helped that. So
yeah, I would agree with that. So it's time, Chris, for my world famous segment. Cars exist. So the Pickles family car is apparently the famously offbeat. Thank you for the colour commentary, writer of this trivia. The famously offbeat Citroen DS, which was available in the US until 1972. So there you go. That's it. That's all the triv. We did it, Chris.
We did it.
So where
are we
going?
Where we're going next?
Absolutely.
Well, so I'm gonna give you some hints, but because I don't think you must have seen this film, but I'm not 100%. I don't think it's a film we've ever discussed. So here are some hints. It is one of those films that is, how films like Cool Runnings and films like, Back to the Future, Planes, Trains and Automobiles, even though we've not done it, Home Alone, Getting Even with Dad. You know how sort of like the archetypal film for this podcast has a certain feeling, was shot at a certain time, has a certain aesthetic, yeah?
Sure.
It's one of those. So it's a classic Rewind Reviews movie.
Okay.
It's got an actor we both love in it. It is a film I remember me and my sister loving as children, but I think we maybe had a recorded version, but we didn't. It's not a film that it's not a film we had on an official VHS. So even though we love this movie, we didn't go back to it that often at all. I don't think I've seen this film in well over 25 years, if not longer. So there's a little bit of a theme with the Rugrats vibe. I'm not entirely sure if you've seen this film, you've definitely not seen it as long either, in as much time either. And Dan, it contains as a central premise, I think, the most controversial and unlikely to hold up premise of any film we've ever reviewed on here.
I have no
Any
idea.
guesses?
No, I don't. I wish I did, because that's a fascinating combination of words you just used.
We are going to the Leslie Mann, Christopher Lloyd comedy Rent a Kid.
I don't remember this movie at all.
You might not have seen it then.
I don't think I have. I don't think I've ever seen this movie. I don't think I even know what this movie is.
Well, go in fairly blind then. Although the title is the title pretty much gives you the premise. Yeah, I have no idea how this is going to hold up.
Yeah, Leslie Nielsen.
So maybe you haven't seen it.
No, I've never even heard of it.
So we got a film Dan hasn't seen and a film I've not seen in minimum 25 years, if not actually more. It's probably closer to 30 than it is. No, probably not closer to 30, but yeah.
I've never heard of this movie.
There you go then. That's where we're going next, baby.
Who even produced this? Republic Pictures. Where did you find this? Like, I didn't know this movie existed. What? How did you see this movie?
I remember watching it as a kid.
Yeah, but where? Like, was it on VHS? Was it on TV? Like, what? Like,
it was on TV, and I think we recorded it on TV, and had a home recorded version. Which obviously, to some degrees, those home recorded tapes just get chucked in a box with others, and that's why it wasn't a film I went back to. So yeah,
this is wow. This is the thinnest Wikipedia page I've ever seen for a movie.
I know.
Wow. Okay, yeah, sure. Let's do that. Fascinating. I'm just staring at this Wikipedia page, like, blown away by how little information there is here. Like, it's almost like it's not a real movie, and someone kind of like invented a Wikipedia page for it, but didn't actually have a lot of fake information to add.
I mean, it sounds like that, doesn't it? Like, do you know what I mean? Leslie Nelson and Christopher Lloyd in a film called Rent a Kid. Like,
wow. All right. Well, yeah. Here we go. So, as has been established, we're going to be covering that next week. I'm excited. It's an interesting one. I have literally no sense of what this is, so I'm pretty excited about it. So yeah, come back in a week's time to hear us talk about that, or you can hear it right now if you head over to the Patreon, patreon.com/nothingbutstatic, where you can listen to episodes a week early. I should clarify, and I keep forgetting to say this on various podcasts, we have an RSS feed. So some people have sort of said, well, with the Patreon, I don't want to have to download the files awkwardly and get them onto my device, through Patreon's system. If you're a part of the Patreon, you get an RSS feed that you can put into your podcast app of choice, and then new episodes of this and Analyzing Avatar are just available through your RSS feed to stream straight to your phone, whenever, wherever, or download, depending on your preference, at your leisure. It's way more convenient than having to keep going to the Patreon website to download the files. You can do that too, and I think some people do that, but I recommend using the RSS feed. And I don't mention that as much as I probably should, because I think that's actually puts some people off signing up to the Patreon, is not wanting to have to download the files through Patreon, because I get it, not convenient at all. I think Patreon need a better app that you can do that stuff through, but that's just me. Anyway, yeah, the other ways you can help us, if you obviously go to youtube.com, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's a little website, youtube.com. You can go there and you can subscribe to our channel and then like some of the videos. That helps us. You can do that. That's free of cost, other than your time, which is valuable. I don't want to make it sound like I don't think your time is valuable, but it's free in terms of money to do, and it helps us out. You can keep supporting us by continuing to listen. Of course, you can help support us as well by telling a friend. You got a friend who likes shit movies from the 90s, or a friend who's, like me, just absolutely fascinated at the existence of Rent-A-Kid as a movie? Point it out to them. Although right now they have to get on the Patreon to do it, which would be a bold first step if you've not listened to the podcast previously. So maybe introduce them to some of our older episodes first. Tell a friend, get them into it. Why not? Otherwise, just keep listening. We appreciate you doing that very much. We're excited. I'm staring at this fascinated. If you, I made the mistake of referencing Rent-A-Kid again, and my brain keeps just turning off when I try to process this movie's existence. Just the poster alone, it's who made this and why? That's the worst poster I've ever seen for a movie.
So as far as I can tell, it is on Prime, but the poster used on Prime has a foreign language for the actors' names and the subtitles and stuff. So I don't know if the version on Prime is dubbed in another language. So we shall see.
This might even be a challenge for us to find and watch.
Let me just click on let me just watch a moment of it.
It's so funny because for some reason I was convinced you were going to pick, the Bob Hoskins Mario Brothers movie this week.
Why, did we discuss that then or something? I can't remember.
No, I just thought you were going to do the math on the dates, because obviously the Mario Brothers movie, the Illumination one, comes out around the time the next episode releases. So I was, because you're often the one that's let's do a movie that's relevant. So I was fully expecting, until you started talking and describing the movie, I was I don't know what this is.
Sorry that I didn't do one that's relevant, but sorry.
No, don't apologize. I was just for what I'm saying is, from my perspective, going into it, I think he's going to choose the original Bob Hoskins Mario Brothers movie because it's hilariously awful. And then to hear a name of a film I've literally never heard of, it could not be further from expectations.
But that's quite fun. It's so funny, isn't it? Because for all intents and purposes, and I know you've got another movie that neither of us have seen, But like, I haven't seen this film in like 25 years, and you've never seen it, so it's quite it's a very different type of episode for that reason, which is fun.
Yeah, I'm on board with it. I think it's funny.
Right,
so yeah,
so
thanks
let's see
everyone
if it's
for,
in English.
for
Hold on.
listening.
Hold on, one second. Let's see if it's.
Oh, you gonna check if the
it's not
movie
playing.
isn't even in English on Prime? That's a good idea.
Yeah, I'm gonna check that now. Hold on, let me disconnect it from there. Oh, I've got the volume set down. That's why.
Makes grown-ups feel a little uneasy, okay? And Molly, when I'm...
Yeah, there you go. It's in English. So there you go. We can watch it on Prime. It's not even not accessible.
That's so good. All right, so thanks everyone for listening. If you want to comment on anything that's been said in this podcast, you have some strong thoughts on the Rugrats or Chris's next film choice, feel free to send them to us. You can do so by either going to the YouTube channel and putting it in a comment below the video in question. So it's youtube.com/nothingbutstaticuk to get to the YouTube channel for us. Or you can go on Twitter and send us stuff. I've been trying to figure out a way we can do this now, because I think people will still want to occasionally tweet us, but I don't check Twitter anymore. Maybe I'll come up with a hashtag that people can use. I can just search that hashtag every now and then, because I'm just not going to see the replies. So we'll see. I'll figure that out. I'll come back to that. But you can still tweet at us directly, and I might see it at Dan Doolan or at C Billingham. I feel like you're more likely to be spotted by Chris now than me. But give it a go. You can also email us, mail@nothingbutstatic.co.uk, if you have any thoughts on any of the nonsense we've just said. But thank you all very much for listening. We appreciate you. We love you. And I guess we'll see you in a week's time for Rent-A-Kid.
I'm Chris Billingham.
Oh, yeah, so, sorry. Yeah, I've been Dan Doolan. Sorry, I'm lost.
It's really thrown you, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has. It really has. Yeah, you could not have.
But you've referenced liking the idea before of doing a movie you've never seen. So this is that. Maybe.
No, it's not so much that. It's like the lack of this movie's existence in culture that's thrown me. It's like, it's not just a movie I've not seen. It's a movie that, like, I've not ever even heard of. Do you know what I mean? That's what's really thrown me about it. Like, it's not that it's a movie I've gone, oh, I never saw that one. I'm literally like, I didn't know this existed, and that is unusual.
And it's unusual for there to be a movie that you never knew existed that has Leslie Mann and Christopher Lloyd in it.
You keep saying Leslie Mann. You mean Leslie Nielsen? I want to clarify. Leslie
Sorry,
Mann is the actress
Leslie
from
Nielsen,
Judd Apatow comedies.
Yeah.
I think she's married
Leslie
to Judd
Nielsen.
Apatow.
Yeah, Leslie Nielsen. Yeah.
But yeah, I love Leslie Nielsen. It's pretty weird. It's odd. Especially, between him and Christopher Lloyd, I feel like I should know this movie existed. And I've never heard of it in my life. So, wow. Yeah. That is what's doing it. Anyway.
Right.
Do it.
I've been Chris Billingham.
I've been Dan Doolan.
And this review has been Rewound.